instance, when Lambo and Gabe play a best of 3, the decider is pretty much always on Moondance, which is it's quite funny how that works.
Yeah, it's always funny, and that's for me. That's always what the mark of like a good map pool is that there's different things that get let through, and it's just neat. But we'll talk about that a little bit later because we have spawning up in the top right for Onside Gaming. It is the Purple Zerg player Solar.
Lovely to see it didn't take Solar a long time to find a new team.
Yeah.
He just left and immediately joined Onside, so that's good news for him. In the bottom left side, we're looking at main base of one of the most loyal individuals in this scene. He's been with Mouse Sports for a solid 10 years at this point. This is HeRoMaRinE.
I'm going back to the thing you said earlier about the handing the €50 note, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, that's the equivalent of you lost your house at the blackjack table, and then somebody hands you a Pop-Tart on the way out, and you're just like, oh, well, this is great. I love Pop-Tarts.
Get a voucher,
Yeah.
rubber water,
Yeah.
unlimited coffee for the rest of the night.
Shrimp cocktail on the house.
And I mean, it was a great series, and that was just overall just a great tournament for StarCraft, of course. Even that semi-finals where Gabe just came out guns blazing, 2-0 over Raynor, and it looked like he was winning Game 3 for a little bit. I started to pinch myself. I was like, is this happening? Big Gabe in the grand finals of Katowice, 3-0 Raynor. In the end, he fell short, and I think back then he said he felt he ran out of strategies. That was this one thing. After playing that best of 5 against Solar and then playing another best of 5 the following day against Raynor, he just felt at one point everything he was going to do was obvious. And I do think that strategies are going to be very important for Gabe in this best of 5 too. You could say it always is, but that wouldn't even necessarily be the case. If you're the straight up better TVZ player, what's stopping you from playing triple CC, Heli, and Banshee every single game? Like, if you generally are better, you can make the difference there. But I think Gabe will look at Solar and be like, I'm great, but that Solar guy, he's pretty damn great too. So I'm sure that Gabe is going to try to get a cheeky win at least once in this best of 5, perhaps even twice, with slightly different and way more aggressive builds.
Yeah, and I think we're already potentially angling towards that to start things off. We have ourselves started off with what has been kind of the flavor of the week, at least in GSL. Command Center first. Command Center first. It feels like in this matchup, feels like it's been years, maybe decades at this point is what it actually feels like. Because, you know, StarCraft 2, we just get so many games being played all the time as we see the Reaper suffering from almost definitely some motion sickness right there. We see Bly, you know, going for like proxy hatch Ravager, and he'll just do it. But no one else does that. So all these Terran players, they're just going Command Center first, unpunished, over and over and over again. And I keep asking myself, when is it going to give? But I mean, you know, not yet.
Yeah, and I can't really blame Solar for it, because imagine if Solar would go proxy hatcher in the first game, a strategy that I'm sure he knows how to execute, but he's probably not a top-tier expert in, like someone like Bly who's done it thousands of times. And Gabe would have gone for a very standard build, scouts it immediately, because then we are standing here and be like, wow, that's actually kind of weird. Why is Solar doing this in the first game? This seems unnecessary. Can't really blame him for it. And as Lambo also expressed in one of the interviews that he had recently, is like scouting that your Terran, by the time that you scout that a Terran player went for Command Center first, it's kind of too late to punish it. You can only really punish it if you do it blindly. But yeah, why would Solar gamble? Solar is going to come into the series confident, feeling that he can set the record straight for what happened back then in March in Poland, and I don't think Solar is looking to gamble a whole lot.
No, it certainly doesn't look that way. But we are seeing kind of what you alluded to, but this is something that TY at his height loved doing, is he would go Command Center first, and then he'd still go for a fast third Command Center. He'd just do it even faster off a better economy, and it's like, well, all right. This is a pretty good setup, and it is going to be the Cloak Banshee follow-up. Solar, great scout, he's going to figure this out. So, you know, it's good news for Solar that he knows, but it's also going to be like, you got a little extra something here. I'm not a huge fan of that.
I'm going to take a little look at the first person of Gabe. You know, one little important moment there, actually, is for that Overlord to see the Banshee pop, right? Because scouting a spinning tech lab, yeah, that means something, but it could be a fake. So that Overlord surviving just long enough to see that Banshee come out, that is actually quite lovely, because I'm sure Solo was going to build some spores, but now you know for sure. And there's always like, is he canceling it? Is this a fake? Is it just going to be a Viking or a Liberator? Now you know that that is not the case.
Or even a Raven.
Yep.
Ravens have gotten a bit of popularity in this matchup. Once again, the ability to clear creep, and especially on a map like this, where if you can, well, do exactly what Big Gabe's doing right here, setting up on the edge of creep, picking off tumors, staying at the bottom of the ramp, you can get a lot done. Threatening to run by, but I mean, I feel like most of the non-Korean Terrans don't like running by with those Hellions. Personally, I would love to see more of that kind of play, just to tell their opponent, like, you better watch out. Like, I could do this at any moment. I've always found that the Korean Terrans were a lot more willing to commit hard with that and just, you know, say caution to the wind and let the dice fly.
On one hand, I'm always with you, where I also feel like, man, why don't these Terrans just send it? Like, go ahead and get those 11 drones. But I think it has to do with two things. A, Zerg players just got so much better at, like, crisis management. They'll block a couple Evo chambers, and before you know, you throw away all your Hellions for just a couple of drones. And then it's just not worth it, as we're going to take another look at the first-person view of Gabe. I mean, this feels like one of these many hours, and I'm just watching Gabe stream from home. But normally he gives a little bit of commentary. This time around, there's laser focus. Was that a transfuse from the high ground? It
was a transfuse from the high ground. That was the homie transfuse right there. Oh, and look at, wow. Oh, he sends the Reaper in for a scout during all this. Not able to get too much information, but I mean, he sees the link count at least, which is going to make him say, like, hey, I probably don't want to, you know, go for a run by.
To wrap up the point real quick, the TLDR is that, like, you won't always get the amount of drones that you kind of think you could potentially get, and that's why they don't want to throw away the Hellions. And also, Zerg players are so good at re-droning, and then if you have nothing to push the creep back, well, then it's minute 7, minute 8, and creep is going to be creeping up these ramps over here at the third base, and then you ask yourself, why did I throw away those Hellions, right? And on top of that, the first Marine tank pushes are so much more intimidating if a couple of these Hellions can morph into a Hellbat. So there are many reasons why not to throw away your Hellions, but to do it once in a true blue moon to keep the Zerg players honest is obviously not the worst choice.
Yeah, I think it's a good call to throw it in from time to time. Even once again, like having them, even if you don't bring them with the push like we're seeing here, keeping them at home to deal with run bys. Like the Hellions have a ton of utility, but we are going to be seeing this big push forming up here. Great tank position coming in from Big Gabe. Bane speed is finished up. Combat shields is not yet done for HeRoMaRinE. He's got to be very careful here.
Yep, the Queens have to be very careful as well, but Solo doing an excellent job so far in keeping them alive. Gabe throws down another scan, pushes the creep back even further, but the fact that these rocks are down is so nice for Solar though. That just makes it a lot more likely he is going to get a fantastic engagement. His 1-1 upgrades are done, and it seems like Solar is ready to absolutely send it. How good will this fight be? Well, it definitely seems like it's going to be good enough at first, as he takes care of the Hellbats without any issues whatsoever. Gabe was forced to pick up all of the Marines. Yeah, he saves a couple of those. That is obviously quite good, but losing the tanks means you really lose that staging ground, you lose that momentum, can't really fall back to that spot anymore. I think overall Gabe, even though the supply looks promising, and he's obviously very great when it comes to the macro department, he's gonna have another scary push, but I think he was hoping for a slightly better fight there than what he actually got.
Yeah, I think he definitely was, and I think that's the kind of thing where you're like, combat shields was late, like, ugh.
Bottom side of the map, though, this is actually kind of cool, right? Ooh. Look at these Marines, it's a very easy snipe. I mean, Solar did send a lot of units over towards the bottom right side, trying to save that hatch, but did not work. There was only a single Bane there. Would have loved to see Gabe try to pick that one off, but playing it safe here in the first game. That's the kind of snipes that I'm talking about. Well done there by Gabe. Well, he's definitely playing quite good, and Gabe is always so good in keeping his money low. It's something that I'm very impressed by. We know that he is a macro machine. This time around, he made it a bit too hard on himself. That was not 2 or 3 banelings. That was a solid 8, and that was a little too much for those Marines to deal with.
Yeah, you could see that they were shift-clicked through, so he might have queued them up and then left, and then looked back just a split second too late. So maybe a little bit too much greed right there. And Solar's, he's thinking about pouncing on that to try and kind of initiate a little bit on the other side of the map. But it looks like we're not going to be seeing that, as HeRoMaRinE will once again form up for a big push.
I mean, this is obviously a very interesting phase of the game. Solar is making his way up to Hive. That is actually 70% done already, if not even a bit more. But we have a drop in the main base, and that was a cancel on the Lurker then. And that is massive, because we know that Big Gabriel is not super fond of going up against those Lurkers. I also don't have the feeling that Gabe really wants to play ultra late game. Let's get a bunch of Ghost out. No, Gabe believes in the power of Marine Tank against a player like Solar. So getting a snipe on that Lurker then, I mean, that's as big as they get.
Yeah, it's pretty huge right now. We are going to see the upgrades equalize as 2-2 finishes for Solo. This may be his moment to try and pounce, but more reinforcements are coming across the map. And oh, he's going to get in. He's going to try and get in just before they do. He can pick off those tanks relatively quickly, which he will. It's not so bad. And actually, no, this goes very well for Solar, I would say. HeRoMaRinE was about 3 to 4 seconds away from fully reinforcing that push. Solar gets in at almost a frame-perfect timing right there for when to take that fight.
I wonder what happened to those Marines, because it felt that Solar didn't have too many units to really deal with that double drop. As we have a couple of changelings actually blocking the reinforcements, as the picture-in-picture shows us. That's really cool.
Solar did
definitely waste a decent amount of time rebuilding that Lurker then, because that Lurker then could have easily been done by now. He could have probably already had the first upgrade. But I mean, he still made it up to Hive. First Vipers are out. Blinding Clouds are going to be fantastic. Abduct is going to be fantastic. Medivacs, well, one of them is actually in trouble. Gets picked off too. I think overall Solar is quite happy. But I think Solar kind of feels like, all right, all I need to do in this game is win one more fight. I need to win one more fight against the next time Gabe moves out. Then there is a good chance that Gabe has the little upgrade advantage. His +3 attack is close to finishing up. But if Gabe doesn't get a massive victory before those Lurker upgrades start kicking in, I think this is going to be a very difficult game for the German.
Yeah, it certainly is. And we've already got... Well, actually, we don't have any of the upgrades just yet.
No, that Lurker then only just now finished up.
Yeah.
He waited a while before rebuilding it. Gabe's going to try to go for snipe number 2 on this hatchery, but there are a few too many links. At the same time, Marines on the top side of the map, that's going to be a very easy cancel. As Reno Glance is finishing up as well. Lovely upgrade for the Lynx is going to make those guys attack a whole lot faster.
Yeah, we've also got, unfortunately, HeRoMaRinE didn't start his +3 armor or +2 vehicle weapons right at the start. So you talked about that upgrade timing advantage that you get as a Terran player while the Zerg's Hive is kind of coming online. And, you know, they split up the upgrades. They go for the +1 missile. It's not really going to be that big power spike as early as you'd like to see it. Of course, the +3 attack much more valuable. Hold that thought. We are going to see a big engagement coming in the middle. Ooh, he's going to get away from those abducts. Good job from HeRoMaRinE. Able to get out of there. Now I think you just maybe pop a parasitic bomb. No, he's just going to leave it.
Yeah, he doesn't have too much energy. I always love throwing out the random parabombs into a big clump of medevacs, but if there's only 1 or 2 medevacs out there, there's nothing else really happening, then that's probably not the best way to spend energy when you only have 2 Vipers out.
Yeah, it's expensive. 125 energy takes you a while, even with that consumability. I will say I feel like Solar is one of the better players. It just using Vipers effectively with this kind of mid-game Hydraling Bane before the Lurkers get out there. We are going to see an engagement attempted. I don't know if this is the best move, but there's no tanks just yet. EMP's not going to come in. There we go. Solar coming in. There's that random parasitic bomb you were looking for. And HeRoMaRinE, nice split off. Blinding Cloud. No, it's going to be an abduct on the tank. And this is actually going to be the 5th base position broken. And he's even breaking through to the 4th. Very well done from Solar. Oh my goodness. I looked at that and I thought there was, you know, like, okay, he's coming in from multiple angles, but it doesn't feel like there's that much potential. But man, oh man, was I ever wrong. No tanks in position. Nothing to do with the Vipers and dodges on the EMPs. Solar, he looks sharp today.
Yep, and there were 1 or 2 tanks there, but Gabe was just running forever. But that obviously meant that his army didn't do a whole lot of damage. And it just felt that Solar had a few too many units for Gabe ever to be like, all right, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to start fighting. Beautiful timing, though, right before that command center starts morphing into a planetary or it even finishes up. Kind of weird, because normally you'd be like, you finally made it up to your Lurker then. And I see that Seismic Spines is close to finishing up. Maybe you just want to throw away a couple of units. And I do think that if Solar ever felt like, okay, this is a bad idea, he'd turn around immediately, right? It was kind of more like, I am going to test the waters. I'm going to see if I can trade out some units, delay that base. And, well, if it's going that well, why would you ever stop?
Yeah, and you saw what he was focusing on there during that fight, and it was obviously the Hydraling Bane. You want to make sure that it's spread nicely, that the Banes don't get trapped behind anything, that the Hydras aren't bumbling up the Zerglings everywhere. But that stuff you can kind of pre-position. What his priority was, and it was the right thing to be prioritizing, was the Vipers. He was hunting for any tanks, anything that could slow him down and give Big Gabe the chance to stabilize. And when, he found those units, he picks them off, he abducts, he yoinks them in. I mean, it's what you were saying, like, he goes until he can't go anymore, and he's like, oh, well, you just can't stop me.
Yeah, actually, there is nothing stopping me here. Gabe obviously did not expect Solar to go for a fight like that, which also shows by a couple of the goals being a bit too far forward, right? They were already making their way towards that ramp at that next location of potentially expanding way down the line. Few Marauders were caught by just Lynx alone, and those are normally units that can kind of tank and let the Marines do their thing from the back line. But not today. This man perhaps was playing for the late game. Instead, he accidentally won there without even necessarily planning for it. Played a solid game though, but it's going to be more difficult on this relatively Terran-friendly map. Our Korean Zerg player up 1-0. This is Solar.
And spawning up at the top right, the man from Germany. He's a large one. He's a big one. It's Big Gabe. Mousesports HeRoMaRinE. And he is going to be looking to prove this map is in fact playable for Terran. I think we'll probably see some very aggressive pushes out of Big Gabe. I think a couple of things that immediately come to mind, of course, the 8 racks, the classic, whether that be unreactored or reactored, 12 Marines at a time or 15 Marines at a time, a little bit later, but just off that single factory. But something that he did a couple of times at Katowice, and we haven't seen him do, I think, in a little while, is a neat little push-out timing that happens during the... I like that, the seagulls kind of going over top there. Something that's kind of neat is it's the 5 racks play, but instead of adding on your 4th and 5th reactor, you just keep pumping Marines. You build 7 Marines at a time. You cut SCVs right around 47, 48, and you just go. You have a couple more Marines than the Zerg is used to, and it can really catch Zergs off guard. They're expecting a very finite number of units, a very exact number of units, and you go right in there, you hit with it. It's got a lot of potential.
We'll see if Gabe is going to throw a curveball like that, or if he's just going to play something a little more standard and straightforward. I wonder if Solar will once more go for the quick layer, slightly later Evo chambers, like we saw in the previous game, or if he feels that on a map that is a lot smaller than the previous one. Obviously, Tropical Sacrifice, especially when it comes to how wide it is one of the absolute smallest map pools that I think we've seen in a long time. It is somewhat long, but it's really not all that bad. So I think going for perhaps heavy links, heavy upgrades in a slightly later layer is something I would prefer. And I think Solar loves his run-bys on this map, and a style like that definitely caters towards that style, but we'll see.
It certainly does. There's a ton of attack paths. This is already a very successful Reaper for HeRoMaRinE here. Waterfall, very short map. You don't want to let that Reaper get anything done. So, Solar, he goes for 6 lings. This is something the Korean Zerg players love to do. The standard 4, of course, it's, you're committing to the extra 2 Zerglings. It's 1 less drone. It's not too big of a difference, but it is a difference in the early game. But if you're going to go for that, you best believe that you better keep all the lings alive. If you don't, you're like, well, I kind of just lost half a drone there after also delaying it. It's just it's not a huge deal. It's the early game, obviously, but it's a nice little start for HeRoMaRinE.
Solar will once more gladly sacrifice an Overlord. I say that, but he actually turned around as this Reaper does get one of the creep tumors, but it doesn't get the second one. HeRoMaRinE is building his starport in basically the top left corner of his main base. Makes it a lot harder for an Overlord to go in there, and I guess Solar is okay with losing an Overlord like we saw in the previous game, but if he loses it, he wants to be damn sure that he knows exactly what comes out of that starport, or what the actual setup is in the main base, assuming that there will be a starport. Kind of like that by Gabe, nice little adjustment, and we'll see how Solar is going to tackle this new tiny problem.
Yeah, and speaking of adjustments, we're going to see in just a moment, he's just at 100 gas once again. There's a chance that he just goes single Banshee, no cloak, And yeah, with Stim starting on up, that's exactly what we're going to see. So he's going to show that Banshee. To speak to your point there, he hides that starport, makes it so that finding the actual tech lab is going to be much more difficult. You can show the Banshee you maybe, you know, present to the Zerg player like, yeah, no, Hellion Banshee, yeah, totally standard. You expect a certain thing. You get the spores, and then maybe you drone a little bit harder. And then all of a sudden, we see this much harder push come a little bit earlier. Oh, and oh no, he sees the stim. Okay.
Fake this time though.
There it is. He does fake the cloak. Nice. Yep. Oof. Oh, that's brilliant. And there we see the spore crawlers going down. Boom. Fake upgrade, hyperflight rotors. It's the same cost, so it doesn't make any difference. But it shows us, the commentators, in case we weren't doing our job, exactly what he had planned.
Yep, and exactly what we mentioned in the previous game. Sometimes it could be real, but it's nice to see a Banshee come out as well. This time around, he saw the Banshee, he saw the spinning tech lab, and it's still not exactly what it looks like. So definitely a nice little touch. Now, it's not the end of the world for Solar. It's not like he's going to build 17 spore crawlers and have a complete meltdown. It's like, oh no, it's a cloak Banshee, but it's still cool. It's the little things that Gabe is trying to switch up here. And it's obviously all going to be about this first push. If we talk about the lair and the Evo chambers, it is once more the lair before the Evo chambers. So quick bailing speed, slightly later upgrades for the Lings and Banes. And this is just a stylistic choice that Zerg players go for. There are plenty of Zergs who will still prefer the upgrades before attacking up to lair, but Solar seems to be all about that quick bailing speed.
Yeah, and it's a solid way to play. It makes sense against the Cloak Banshee as well. You can see he starts up that Overseer before even getting the Bane speed as well, so just allocating even a little bit more gas, which is, you know, a testament to HeRoMaRinE, what he does right there. It's not a huge difference, but let's say a fight breaks out. Oh, and hang on. It looks like exactly the build that I described is going to be happening. He's cutting SCVs. He's got 7 Marines on the map at a time. He's making me look like such a genius. I got to buy him the biggest pint after this one because, yeah, this is going to be a very heavily committed push coming in from HeRoMaRinE.
Yep, he's got 5 barracks, and indeed 2 reactors, 1 tech lab, and then 2 barracks don't have any add-ons. Gabe did still sneak out a couple of extra SCVs. He's at 50 now, and he may just kind of alternate between SCVs and Marines. But one thing is for sure, Gabe needs to do amazing with his push. He needs to ideally take out a hatch, take out a base, definitely win the fight, hopefully reset the queen count. Because if he doesn't do any of those things, well, he's going to be in trouble. Because if you take a look at the production facilities, or the structures rather, that he's got down so far, he has no armory. And that means that these 2 upgrades are going to be very late. And Gabe really needs to do amazing work with this push. If he doesn't, he's in serious trouble here at TSL 9 in the lower bracket.
He certainly is, but I think Solar is in a lot more trouble in this game right now. He went up to 73 drones. That is a massive overbuild right there. Oh, nicely done to start things off for HeRoMaRinE. He's really pushing the issue quite hard. If he gets the tanks forward here and can cut these bases off from one another, Solar is going to have a nightmare trying to clear this. Already the Queen's running out of transfuse energy. This is looking good. Yeah, this is looking very good for Big Gabe. Solar going to try and come forward. There's a lot of Baileys, but so many of them going on that one siege tank. It still might be enough for Solar to clear this out. It's so tough to call.
I think it looks pretty good for Solar, man, because he still has 79 drones. The army supply of Gabe is really not that overwhelming anymore. We are going to sneak out a couple of Liberators now, and if these Libs show up and we still have 10 plus Marines, I will believe for Gabe. But right now, the Marine count really is not that impressive. There is a Spore Crawler buying a little bit of time, getting a couple of shots off, and this is where Solar is going to try to reset the tank out once and for all. He gets on top of both tanks. There is still creep in the center. Banelings connecting with Marines in the center of the map, and Solar has even fired up 2 upgrades during all of this. I mean, I don't want to say he's not taking it serious, because he's definitely taking it serious, but he's already thinking of the next phase of the game, while Gabe has barely built an SCV in the last 90 seconds. And for Gabe, it's still all about this push.
Absolutely. He has got full lethal intent right here. No SCVs, no armory, a second factory. There was actually an extremely critical moment that took place where the 3 creep tumors in the middle of the map finished up right on top of HeRoMaRiNE's army. and there was no scan available. You mentioned the creep. The reason why I thought that fight was going so well for Big Gabe, I assumed that the creep would be all disappearing. Meanwhile, we've got a little Link counterattack. That is great for Solar. You might be thinking, oh, it's not that big a deal. You know, he's only picking off 6-7 Marines. Hold that thought. We are going to see. Oh.
And that's why run-bys are a big deal, because the Terran player is often not paying the amount of attention that they should be to their main army. And Solar doesn't hesitate for a second, jumps on top of the army of Gabe and gets the Dream Baneling connections. And just like that, it's 2-0 in favor of Solar, and he's looking mighty fine.
He is looking incredible. He went to 73 drones there, and he still held that push. Honestly, like I was thinking that push was, you know, looking good, but he held that pretty comfortably.
We just had good Baneling connections because there was still creep, and that just makes it very difficult for Gabe to get the perfect splits. I mean, you think back of some of the games we saw, like Raynor and Bunny in the GSL, where the Marines off creep, they have so much potential, especially if they're microed properly, and eventually suddenly it feels like Baneling's promising, and they all just kind of get picked off one by one. But these Banes, they just kept on finding connections, and even if a couple of them rolled into a tank and whatnot, you're in trouble if like 20 Marines survive and they are ready to turn around. But
no
if it's
Banelings
like
left over.
6 or 7 Marines, that's just not enough to even run into a couple of Queens that are standing there holding the line. And that obviously gives Solar time to crank out a few more units. And that's when that 73 economy or drone economy is truly starting to shine.
Yeah, I have, like, man, it was such a razor's edge timing on those creep tumors, which is the weirdest thing to say, especially because it was 3 of them. But, you know, with 20 Marines and 2 siege tanks, like, how long does it take to kill 3 creep tumors? Quarter of a second. If those creep tumors go down that much later, I actually think HeRoMaRinE maybe not necessarily wins the game right there, although, you know, I was hyping it up like
I think it's a much better fight. And, and once more, if he survives that fight with 15 extra Marines, then he can actually immediately steam forward, put a lot of pressure on the Queens. Then you're in the middle of all the bases, so it becomes really hard for Solar to manage all his rally points in the heat of the moment. No, without creep, or without those 3 creep tumors, that's a completely different fight.
Yeah. It's also important to note that we had an extremely, very focused push-in from HeRoMaRinE. He was really looking to go hard and fast in the paint. He did not slowly siege forward. He wanted to end the game right there and then. But we have here, spawning up in the top right, looking to solidify and take this series. It is Onside Gaming's Solar.
In the bottom left side, we're looking at the main base of the German Terran player, still representing Mouse Sports after all these years. He's down 0-2, and he needs to do the same thing as Maru did in the beginning of the day, and that is called a reverse sweep to make it into the next round. This is HeRoMaRinE.
And, I mean, this is a tough position in the series. We talked about it a little bit, or rather, you talked about it a little bit during the HeRoMaRinE Zaun game. HeRoMaRinE Zaun series. It was like, okay, HeRoMaRinE wins game 1, Zaun wins game 2, HeRoMaRinE wins game 3. And I was like, you know, the one game that Zaun won, it was off the back of that proxy gateway. There was no scout for HeRoMaRinE. It was kind of like, it was a pretty unfortunate build order situation for HeRoMaRinE. But you mentioned something very valuable, which is that it was Zaun's map pick game 2, HeRoMaRinE's map pick game 3. Zaun ultimately did lose his map pick in game 4, but going down 0-2 and losing on Waterfall, especially a hyper-aggressive player like HeRoMaRinE, loves those 3-base, 4-base pushes, that's not going to be a good feeling.
Nope. And obviously Gabe is no stranger to the late game, and Gabe is definitely not an all-in player by any means. He is willing to play longer games against Zerg, but I do think that against a Solar, you know, a Solar in this shape, a world-class Zerg like Solar, Gabe definitely prefers the no lurker games, let's be honest. There are a couple of Zergs in Europe that are, you know, often identified as very good. Gabe doesn't mind necessarily going into the ultra late game. 5-6 bases, turtle it up a little bit, try to be like Maru. He does have good ghost control, and I think in general he's very smart moving libs and tanks around. But I think against Solar, I don't want to say that Gabe lacks that confidence, but I think Gabe is very realistic, and he probably feels that his best chances are before those units are out. But Solar has always been, I feel like, kind of an expert in the basic units, and he makes a lot of them. How often do you see Solar float money when he shouldn't be floating money, right? That almost never happens. I think he's very good in keeping his money low, cranking out all the Lings and Banes that are necessary. So stylistically, I do think this is a bit of a problem for Gabe in this current meta, where he hates lurkers as much as he does.
Absolutely, and I mean, so you mentioned it. Solar is so confident with those early game units. It really feels to me like Solar is on a gigantic power spike right now. Oh, he blocks the Reaper from getting out. This should be a dead Reaper.
Yep. Could even pull the drones. Queen.
Yeah, he doesn't even need to. He's just gonna.
There's
he's
another
gonna block
queen
it
on
off.
the other side.
Yeah,
Double
exactly.
Queen is good enough. I mean, obviously, excellent Ling movement there near the ledge, preventing that Reaper from jumping to the low ground. But if you're Gabe right now, it's not the end of the world, but it just adds up, right? You're like already kind of annoyed. That first game, you're like, man, I didn't think it was going all that bad, but then suddenly the game ended. That's a bit annoying, but I'll get him on Waterfall. Then your dedicated push doesn't work, which was basically a 3-base all-in. You're like, all right, now it's getting really annoying. You start game 3, you're like, it's okay. It's data C. Play this map often enough, even in best of 3s, and no stranger to it. And it starts off by losing your Reaper. I mean, once more, it just starts adding up. So we're going to try to get a little bit of momentum with our first 2 Hellions. So far, we're not getting very lucky, but it's a lot of lost mining time and 2 drones. Not a success, but not a complete failure either.
No, certainly not. Like you said, a little bit of lost mining time. Kudos to Solar right there. Very nice micro on the Lings as the Hellions came in. He just neatly tucks a couple of them to the side. He says, well, you're going to try and burn through these Lings, and I'm going to deny the option. I'm not going to make this a problem for me. And did he build any more Lings there? He built 4 more Lings, but I think it was... keeping those alive is so handy for this follow-up Hellion setup, because you know that they're not going to stop at 2 Hellions, not unless they're doing some kind of 2-1-1 setup off of either fast 3rd CC or something like that. But we are seeing, we're going to be seeing a 2-base push here.
And I mean, a bit of lost mining time is obviously very nice, and that's why I said it wasn't a complete disaster, but that only truly matters if you actually indeed have a follow-up. So if Gabe is going for the follow-up that you just mentioned, then it would make sense, and then the mining time matters a lot. Losing all these Hellions, though, is just not acceptable anymore, because the link count wasn't even crazy high. All of them get trapped, all of them get surrounded, and this game really is just a bit of a nightmare for HeRoMaRinE. He has lost 8 Hellions, 1 Reaper, and he has killed 2 drones and 6 Zerglings. Those are shocking numbers. You rarely hear that in a game of HeRoMaRinE. And unless Solar just goes AFK against these Liberators, Gabe is just in all sorts of trouble, man, because this is a bit of a nightmare start. This entire map is going to be purple in the near future, and there is nothing that HeRoMaRinE can do about it.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you either roast or you die. And we are going to be seeing something very unusual, which is this double Liberator setup. This is kind of cute and cheeky.
Yep.
Oh, is he going to get that Queen? So, okay, good job by Solar right there. Shuts down the first Liberator. This is probably the worst situation for actually dealing with the 2-base push, despite the fact that he has had such a good start because of the super delayed layer. But everything else is going so well. On paper, it should be the worst. But everything is going so well, it might not even matter. His creep spread is already at the halfway mark in the map. Yep. He's already knocking down rocks. Everything is firing on all cylinders for Solar.
Gabe did manage to build a 3rd CC while he was losing these Hellions, so it does seem that he doesn't want to go all the way in, as we just have one happy little Zergling getting a complete scout off the main base. You may as well at this point. It just feels that almost everything is going great for Solar. And I looked at how cool that double lip harass looked, right, in the main base. Imagine if you still have those 8 Hellions around. That would be a nightmare for Solar to deal with. That 3rd base, it felt ultra exposed, wide open. Yeah, we have 12 to 14 links, but the Hellions would normally have no issue with that if there is no Queen support. It really is a shame, because I think this could have been all very cool for Gabe. Instead, it was a nightmare. We do unload these Marines. 1 medevac is very low in HP, and it's 1 or 2 hits away from dying. Well, a little bit more, 24 HP, but that still means we have to be very, very careful. Gabe is definitely not loving life, but I'm going to make the best of it. Your tournament life is on the line. Apparently, he had some issues getting here. There were a lot of issues with public transportation in the Netherlands over the last few days, and he did tell me, he's like, I'll be kind of annoyed if I had to travel for such a long time, and I'm gonna go out today, so I was like thinking, well, Solar's journey was probably a bit longer, Gabe. Even with the trains not quite working in the Netherlands as the way they should have. I don't think you're truly the one that could complain about, you know, having a long journey, getting to Utrecht.
Yeah, it's and what I would have said in your situation, you know, obviously you have a good rapport with him. Oh, that was. Don't know how many Marines were in there. I think it was only a couple.
4
but
or 5.
Yeah, it's still painful. Solar hasn't. Oh, there we go. He starts up +2 melee. As I say that, he's got an upgrade lead. Big Gabe cannot be here right now. Bane Speed's going to finish up momentarily. There's no splash damage besides the Hellbats. The splits are very nice.
Yeah, actually very good.
Yeah, if we'd seen those splits in game number 2.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm totally with you. Then that would have looked very different, even on 3. But I think given how this game has gone, this is not necessarily great enough. But it's definitely an amazing fight for HeRoMaRinE. But Gabe obviously needs more than he's been getting so far. He knows it. Picks up a few more Banelings, picks up a few more, but it's 1 or 2 Banelings connecting with the Marines is truly all it takes. Gabe is just kind of parade pushing, rallying literally everything that he has to the other side of the map. He does drop another factory. That was a really good Baneling connection there though for Solar. And while Gabe was doing quite decent for the majority of that fight, and especially the first splits were phenomenal, yeah, everything else in this game has just been a nightmare. You think back at that early game and yeah, no amount of splits is going to save you there. GG gets called. And we are going to wrap up the very first day of TSL with another 3-0. Solar and Maru are the 2 players that advanced this brutal opening day of TSL 9, and they both look damn good doing so.
They absolutely did. Neither one of them really looked... Well, actually, sorry, that's not true. Maru was in a lot of trouble in that first series of the day, but he managed to get that, obviously, big revenge match versus Hero, the reverse sweep. Huge. Definitely recommend checking out that series if you haven't already done so. But once he got rolling in game number 3, he won 6 straight maps. Same thing with Solar. He only dropped.
Solar didn't drop.
No, he didn't drop a map. No, he won 6-0. Wow, Solar. Oh, is looking to impress his new team here, and I can tell you what, he's impressed the hell out of me.
It's been a strong day for Onsite Gaming. I mean, both of them just looking fantastic. I mean, sure, Maru dropped 2 maps, but he dropped 2 maps against the reigning GSL Code S champ, so there is nothing to be ashamed of there. Overall, definitely, I wish we would have seen more. I love seeing guys like Solar and Gabe duke it out. Solar, fantastic, obviously, to see him advance, but would have been lovely for Gabe to get 1 or 2 points at least on the board. And especially that final game, it's just started off like an absolute nightmare. You lose the Reaper, you lose 8 Hellions, and he killed 2 drones and 6 links. Like, Gabe can play another 100 TVCs and he won't have a start that bad. Like, that just doesn't really happen normally for Gabe, so bit of a shame. Displayed some cool micro towards the end, but he was just a little bit too far behind. Overall, though, good run for Gabe in this tournament, right? He obviously made it to the offline finals and definitely played a couple of very solid games, especially online. And let's not forget, earlier today, gets a 3-1 victory over Zaan. I mean, Zaan is a pretty alright StarCraft 2 player, so I do think Gabe can leave the tournament with his head held up high.
Yeah, absolutely. He can certainly be happy about that. And you know who's going to be happy to analyze this one? It is going to be the handsome duo from Shopify. They're going to be guiding you through that matchup. We're going to be throwing it over to HeRoMaRinE, Lamstum, Harstum, and Lambo.
Oh, good lord, that was some terrible tries there for making a caster duo name, but we appreciate the attempt anyway, Statfast. Yeah, we're here on the Shopify Rebellion caster chairs, or the analyst chairs, I should say. And let's just pop into the first map straight away, which was Tropical Sacrifice.
Yeah, it was on Tropical Sacrifice, and Gabe actually opened very standard. He opened with CC first, and then he just went 3CC Banshee. This is a build where the Korean Zergs say that they find it very comfortable to play against, because you get some of the crew spread out, you know exactly what to expect. The combat shield is quite late, so you can't really get all int after the 2 Banshees because they just cost so much gas in the early game, so you kind of know what you're up against. And Solar kind of showed that. So Solar's game plan was the same in every single game, and he has been playing like this against Gabe every single game because it has been working. He goes up to 5 gas, he makes Ling Bane a Hydra Den, cleans up the first push, just like we see here with the Ling Bane and the Queens. This timing actually was beautiful from Solar because he had right as the reinforcements were about to join up. And this spot was quite nice for Gabe because he already cleared the creep up, so it's very difficult to dislodge such a position against tanks. Here we see it just again. Very similar position, very similar in supply there once again. They're also even in upgrades, and once again, Solar kind of hit the perfect timing where the reinforcements were not quite there. They were not quite shooting, so he caught basically half of Gabe's army at the top of the ramp and managed to take another good fight. And from there on out, he just kind of gets Vipers, and then his game plan changes to trying to deny the 5th base of the Terran. So the moment the Terran tries to take a 5th base, he wants to morph a ton of Banelings and then just attack with Vipers. And usually he tries to blinding cloud the siege tanks, but the problem of HeRoMaRinE here was that he lost a lot of tanks with these pushes that he was doing, so he had very little tanks in position. We can see his only anti-air here is the one tank that was shooting, and then there was just nothing behind. This tank is the second form of AoE that he had. So he just had nothing against the Banelings, which meant all of his buy units were just consistently running. There was no damage output, and Solar cleaned up that first game very, very convincingly.
Yeah, usually when you see a Zerg player have more supply at the end of the fight than at the start of the fight, that's not a great sight for the Terran. Now, this game was pretty interesting here, Lambo. What did we see in the early game for Gabe?
Yeah, so Gabe once again opened with 3cc Banshee. This time around he did fake cloak, and it was only one single Banshee. And instead he opted for 2 earlier extra barracks. So he went for a very fast 5 rigs. It's basically a 2 base all in, but with a fake 3rd command center. And this push is basically game deciding. Whenever you play like this, you have to pretty much kill or cripple the Zerg. And he just didn't manage to do that. Solar once again went up to 79 drones. This is the drone count that you have when you saturate all 4 mineral lines. And then he even took 5 gases. And he even made a Hydra and the Hydra upgrade. And he still somehow defended the push. Maybe Gabe went a little bit too fast here because the entire push was still on creep. As we can see here, basically Gabe's entire army is on creep, or HeRoMaRiNE's rather. And Sora just got Baneling connections that were good enough to clean up the fight for him. It was a little bit unlucky that he didn't catch the creep tumors that were behind his army. So there were 3 creep tumors that survived there, that were planted right in front of him, and he either didn't see them or he didn't clean up all of them, and that kind of cost him big time here because that creep boost is huge for the melee units of the Zerg. And yeah, at this point, once you hold it once, it's not that scary anymore because they only produce tanks 1 by 1, and at this point, Solar has a 4 base economy against a 2 base economy. So yeah, once you hold it once, there's not much the Terran can do.
Yeah, definitely seems to be the case here. Solar even confident enough to get to 2. So this game pretty much ended, and that meant that HeRoMaRiNE only had a single life left. So if we could pop over into the 3rd game, we have... there's a pretty interesting one here. So for the first time in 3 games, rather than playing a quick triple CC, we actually saw a double gas opener out of HeRoMaRiNE, and he followed that up even with barracks 2 and 3 before the 3rd command center.
Yeah.
This is extremely rare.
This is extremely uncommon. Usually if you go 3 racks before the additional command center, you don't open with 2 big starport units, so the Liberators take longer to build than the Vikings and the Medevacs. And he even made 8 Hellions. So even though he went for 2 extra early barracks, they're not that early. And Solar just lost nothing against it. He lost 2 drones against the initial 2 Hellion run by, then he killed all the rest of the Hellions while the Liberators were AFK down here, just chilling. So it was a little bit mistimed from HeRoMaRiNE, and I think just everything fell apart. I mean, this was basically the perfect early game. Then he went on to kill those 2 Liberators without... He basically lost 2 drones for 2 Liberators. I think that's a trade that we're all happy to take. He barely got that Liberator before it could disengage. So, I mean, at this point in the game, if you look down there at the supply, he's already way up, and that's not supposed to be that way.
Yeah, and what HeRoMaRiNE is doing here as well behind it is extremely aggressive. This is not really an all-in, but it's a 2.5 base pressure, basically. A very heavy pressure where you do need to deal some damage. And if you have such an early game and you get scouted by a Ling as well for free, like we see over here, there's really no chance, right?
Yeah, absolutely not. This is basically a tempo-based play, and once again, Solar is holding the 2.5, like you called it, base aggression with a complete 4-base saturation. He once again went up to 79 drones and had no problems whatsoever defending this. HeRoMaRiNE also wanted to go for a Hellbat follow-up with a little bit of an earlier armory, and he produced a couple extra Hellions. Maybe if his initial Hellions stayed alive, maybe this looks a little bit different, but Solar just played rock solid. He just played completely standard every single game, the same, and he has been playing like that against HeRoMaRiNE for a while, and it just seems to work. He's just playing that well defensively, that he always gets into the position that he wants to be in.
Solar overall this tournament so far looking very clean mechanically, right? If we compare him, for example, to his DreamHack Valencia performance, where he looked to be slacking a little bit. Even in Home Story Cup, he dropped a couple of maps to players perhaps he shouldn't have. But here he seems to be absolutely on point.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of a boost of motivation when he changed the teams. You know, it feels nice to have a something different. Can be anything. Can be a new keyboard. In this case, it's a new team, and yeah, HeRoMaRinE here for the first time also tried to go into the Widow Mines right away because he had the reactor already set up on the factory. It felt like it would make much more sense than going into the late tanks, but yeah, in this case, the early game was just way too good for Solar, and he cleaned it up with his second 3-0 of the day, I believe.
Yeah. Very impressive play out of Solar. Curious to see what he can do tomorrow when he will be playing against the loser of
the Serral versus Rainer.
Serral versus Rainer, right? So a ZVZ for sure. That's interesting. All right. I think that's going to be it for us today here at the Analyst Desk. I do believe that we still have an interview with Solar, who's come off his second win of the day.
That is correct, Kevin. I am here now with Solar right after his victory versus HeRoMaRinE. Well, first of all, congratulations again, Solar. It's nice to see you again after, you know, what feels like maybe an hour or something. Felt like a pretty quick 3-0 series. How you feeling coming off the victory?
Yeah, I was pretty confident against him, and all the games are going through my way. Also, I'm a bit tired too. I think everyone here does it too. So I just want to make them only back to hotel.
Good guy, Solar, thinking about everyone else that he's going to have to play, making sure that everyone gets some good amount of rest. Well, I think I was a little bit afraid for you, I would say, in some of those games. I know in game number 1 and game number 2, I guess we'll take it with game number 1 first. Like things were looking pretty back and forth. It got a little bit scary after your lurker den got sniped and stuff. How confident were you after that and kind of moving into like the next stage of that game?
Yeah, I thought I was not that in good shape because I lost my 5th place. Also, I lost the lurker den to mid-back, but. Yeah, but like he keep send army to the forward and he lose a lot of tanks, I feel. So I think like after I get enough amounts of baneling, I think he doesn't have enough tanks to snipe them. So I just try to max out my mass banes as possible, like the lurkers. Yeah, and it worked. Yeah.
All right, and then game number 2, I think. I was really surprised. You got up to like 79 or so drones. It looked like you just had no cares in the world or anything. And then HeRoMaRinE comes in with his big push after doing a good job kind of denying their scouting and stuff. When did you realize that attack was coming? And also, how the heck did you hold that?
I saw his army, and it was a lot of armies than normal stand-up builders. So I was very surprised. Oh, what is this? And I lose some banes at the moment. Oh, I lost. But he keep forward to the. I think he keep forward too much in the creeps, and my fight was a bit better than his fight. So yeah, that's why I win. Yeah.
All right, just great execution on the defense then. Well, congratulations again on that, and that means that you move on to face off versus the loser of Rainer versus Serral. Do you have any preferences on who you want to face? Do you want Revenge versus Serral? Like, what's going through your mind on that?
Actually, both players are really great, Zerg and Protoss. So I'm a bit afraid of them. But my first score was like my top 6 in this tournament, so I'm already very satisfied over my Lizard. Yeah.
And you're allowed to just say you'd prefer not to say. You're allowed to say you don't want to answer this if you want to. But but would you rather face Rainer's Zerg or Protoss?
Zerg.
All right, you heard it here, folks. Any kind of final shout-outs or anything you want to do before we wrap up?
Yeah, thank you for the fans watching in Korea, because it's very late time too. Shout out to my team too, and shout out my family and my wife.